high anxiety warning with this next video. Well, I think it's going to be that, but especially with the thumbnail. It says the terrifying last minutes of a wedged caver. And apparently it's the Culverson Creek cave tragedy. I don't know what this Culverson Creek is, but we're here to find out. If you're squeamish or you don't like things about caves, then look away. Otherwise, let's check it out. Okay, let's see exactly what the terrifying last minutes of this wedged caver is.
In this video, we will be looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. The second one, in particular, resulted from excessive display of overconfidence coupled with self-loathing arrogance.
Well. Self-loathing arrogance and overconfidence. Isn't that what most cavers like? I'll get in there, I'll do this. Just look at John Jones in the Nutty Putty, man. That guy was very, very experienced and he still got stuck upside down, didn't he?
Conversely, the first incident was an unfortunate case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. As always, viewer discretion advised. On the cold afternoon of November 28th, 1985, a group of 7 cavers entered the Culverson Creek Cave in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. The recent record rainfall had caused severe flooding in the area, and the group had wisely abandoned their original plan to explore Friar's Hole, opting instead for a cave that seemed less prone to flooding. They were hopeful that Culverson...
Hang on a minute, less prone to flooding is not, like, foolproof, right? It's pissing down outside. Don't go in any cave. Even if it's not raining, don't go in any cave. That way, you'll never get stuck. I should be the advice guy. I'm going to stand at the top of various caves throughout my lifetime now and say, don't go down there, giving advice out.
Though unfamiliar to them, would offer a safer adventure. The cave greeted them with a 5 to 8 foot wide canyon, the floor covered by a shallow stream that flowed swiftly over loose rock slabs. The group pressed forward, unaware of the tragic event that would soon unfold. Only about 50 feet into the cave, they came upon a massive boulder, a 5 foot tall rock that partially blocked the passage. The group had 2 choices: to climb over the boulder or to squeeze through a narrow gap between the rock and the cave wall where the stream rushed by. 3 cavers passed the obstacle without incident, carefully making their way through the tight space. Eric Tzakle, a 26-year-old with plenty of caving experience, led the next group of 3. He chose the left-hand route, stepping carefully as he walked through the stream. Just as he reached the center of the boulder, everything changed in an instant. The boulder shifted. It was as though time slowed as the massive rock tilted left, its weight suddenly becoming unstable. The cavers reacted quickly, trying to stop it from moving, but their efforts were futile. The massive boulder crashed into the narrow corridor, pinning Eric between the cave wall and the rock, his body frozen in place. His left temple and shoulder pressed against the cave wall, his right cheekbone trapped against the cold stone of the boulder. His legs dangled beneath him, and though his hard hat stayed on, his body was stuck, completely immobile. The witnesses reported that the weight of the rock pressed relentlessly against his chest, making it harder and harder for him to draw breath.
That'll be like when you get squeezed by a python and it's squashing your rib cage, and the more you breathe out, it'll be pushing on more and more and more and more and more. I mean, what shit luck. How unlucky must you be to just be passing through and then the rocks suddenly go after 3 people went before you?
Every shallow inhale felt like fire in his lungs.
Wow.
His heart raced as adrenaline pumped through his veins, but his body remained frozen, locked in place by the unyielding stone.
Oh shit.
His friends, still in shock, could do nothing but watch. They could see the agony in his eyes, the panic rising as his body grew weaker by the second. The helplessness his companions felt was suffocating. One of them rushed out of the cave to get help, while the others stayed behind, desperately trying to move the boulder. They pushed with all their strength, grunting and straining against the immense weight. But it was futile. The rock was too heavy. They tried to wedge crowbars into place, pulling at the levers with every ounce of strength they had.
I mean, 5 foot boulder, 5 foot boulder is nearly as tall as a person. It's not going to be light, is it? You know what I mean? It's gonna be no. Even then, 7 people wouldn't be able to move it.
But nothing worked. All the while, they watched as Eric's breaths grew shallower. Eric remained conscious for about 30 seconds after the rock fall, but for those around him, it felt like an eternity.
Wow.
His shallow breaths were labored, each one weaker than the last. Within moments, his body stopped moving altogether.
Oh, shit.
A small trickle of blood ran from his left nostril, and his pulse, though still strong, was fading fast.
Yeah.
One of the cavers tried to prop him up, hoping to relieve the pressure even slightly, but it made little difference. The silence that followed was deafening, filled only with the distant rush of water and the frantic beating of their hearts.
The silence that followed later was deafening. It's like almost poetic there, isn't it? Wow. Wow. This guy's really good at telling this story and very good at the drama as well, with the music and
Filled only with the distant rush of water and the frantic beating of their hearts. More help arrived in waves. At 4:20 p.m., the group finally had a hydraulic jack in hand. Nearly an hour after the accident, it was clear that time was running out. With a team of rescuers, crowbars, and the jack in hand, they managed to shift the boulder just enough to free Eric's lifeless body. His friends dragged him to a
He must
drier
be
part
dead.
of the cave, just 20 feet away, and immediately began CPR, their hands trembling with the effort. The minutes that followed felt like a race against fate.
An hour. He was going unconscious after 30 seconds. You know what I mean? An hour after, he's going to be... even if they got his heart going and stuff, he's going to be brain
Every
dead, isn't
pump
he?
of the chest, every desperate breath they forced into his lungs, carried the hope that they could still bring him back. But Eric wasn't responding. His skin had turned pale, and though his body was warm, life was slipping away. Rescue teams arrived in waves, with paramedics taking over CPR, working tirelessly to revive him. For more than an hour, they fought to save him. By 5:25 p.m.,
Pronounced
Eric
dead.
was finally
Yeah.
carried out of the cave on a stretcher. The cold air outside hit them like a wave, but they barely noticed. Eric was rushed to the hospital, where doctors administered IVs and cardiac drugs in a last-ditch effort. But despite all their efforts, it was too late.
Dead.
Eric Tsakli was pronounced dead, his life stolen in a flash by an unpredictable accident,
Wow.
one that none of his friends, despite all their experience and caution, could have foreseen. The cave that had seemed like a safer choice had turned into a tomb. This next story was as a result of
Well, there you go. That first one, I mean, it doesn't matter how experienced you are. If a rock shifts by itself, doesn't matter how much experience you've got, does it? Maybe people should carry a hydraulic jack with them, just in case something like that happens. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the only thing I could say to deter this sort of thing from happening again, sort of thing. But I mean, whoa, what shit, look. I mean, that guy would have blanked out pretty quick. It's not like John Jones, like I said before, the Nutty Putty, who was upside down for 19 hours before he finally died. You know what I mean? That would have been agonizing. At least that was quickish, if you know what I mean. Right, story 2. But they said story 2 is quite intense, didn't they? They said it's the worst one.
a safer choice had turned into a tomb. This next story was as a result of sheer arrogance, an
Oh, here we
ego-driven
go.
decision that led to a nightmare. It was a crisp, clear morning on April 26, 1982, when James May stepped out into the world, a young man of 21, with a heart full of arrogance and a mind brimming with overconfidence. James had always believed in his ability to conquer any challenge, to bend the natural world to his will, and Hookah Cove Cave near the Cave of the Winds in Colorado seemed no different. His fragile ego was both his strength and his weakness,
Okay.
the very thing that led him to places where most men would hesitate, and it would also lead him to the brink of destruction. James' friends were no strangers to his temper. They knew
Okay.
how quickly pride flared up in him, how easily his ego bruised. When they all set out for the cave that Saturday morning, he walked with his head held high, striding ahead with his usual swagger, believing he could handle whatever the earth beneath their feet threw at him.
Okay.
Dressed in a simple shirt and jeans, knee pads strapped on, and armed with 3 flashlights, James didn't think twice about not carrying food or water. The cave would not beat him, not with extra batteries in his pocket,
I mean, look at that
or water.
shot.
The cave would not
If I'd have seen that hole where his feet are, this video, obviously it's stock footage or something. If I'd have seen a hole like that, I'd be like, I'm not even trying to go through there. You'd be lucky if I could get my arm through it. Look, his 2 feet are there. You're asking to get stuck. You were asking to get stuck. Why do people do this?
Flashlights, James didn't think twice about not carrying food or water. The cave would not beat him, not with extra batteries in his pocket. His companions, perhaps a little wary, perhaps a little tired of his bravado, followed in silence.
Yeah.
As they ventured deeper into Hookah Cove Cave, a bitter argument broke out. Perhaps it was James's usual arrogance.
Yeah.
Perhaps
Get up your own arse, you mate. You think you're better than everyone. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to go ahead. You lot stay here. Whirr. That's what's going to happen, isn't it?
perhaps it was the tension of the narrow spaces and the cold, damp air that gnawed at their nerves. The details of what was said may have been lost to time, but the aftermath was clear. James, filled with anger and pride, turned on his friends. "Leave me! I'll find my own way out." His face twisted with fury as he declared that he didn't need them, and they did. His companions, tired of his outbursts, took him at his word. Perhaps they thought he'd follow after them,
Looked up on him.
tail between his legs, or perhaps they thought the cold darkness of the cave would humble him.
Oh, they left
But they
him.
left. Now, alone in the belly of the
You
earth,
can imagine it though, can't you? Someone sat there having a go at you. Ah, leave me. Yeah, you're a bunch of knobheads. Ah, do you know what? Kim, leave him down there. Leave him down there. See how he gets on his own. I would, if he was going to be like that.
darkness of the cave would humble him, but they left. Now, alone in the belly of the earth, James May was master of his fate, or so he thought. The realization came slowly. At first, James reveled in his solitude, convinced he could navigate the maze-like passages on his own. He flipped on one of his flashlights and marched forward, deeper into the cave. His pride kept his fear at bay, but soon the shadows seemed to stretch longer. The echoes of his footsteps grew louder, and the winding passages became disorienting. Hours passed. His companions were long gone, and the way out, which once seemed so simple, now evaded him.
He's
He
stuck.
tried one passage only to find it led deeper into the cave. He turned back, tried another route, but it too led to a dead end. His confidence began to wane. The cave was vast, larger than he had imagined, and now he was utterly, hopelessly lost.
This is a story that reminds me of like when people say about the catacombs in France. And if you go in there, if you don't go in the guide rope or follow the arrows, then they're that big. You can be in there for days, weeks, years. You know what I mean? And this seems like a similar sort of story.
Vast, larger than he had imagined, and now he was utterly, hopelessly lost.
Stupid.
His throat parched and his stomach twisted with hunger. The light from his flashlight seemed dimmer now. James sat down on a damp rock, his knees pulled to his chest, panic gnawing at the edges of his mind.
Yeah.
He could hear the drip of water somewhere in the distance, the slow, steady sound that reminded him of time passing. Too much time. Night came and went. Though in the cave, time was a meaningless blur. James's flashlights, one by one, they flickered out.
Oh dear.
He was alone in complete darkness, the cold biting at his skin. His thin shirt and jeans did nothing to keep out the creeping chill of the cave's depths. Shivering uncontrollably, he realized how ill-prepared he truly was. He could feel the weight of exhaustion settling in.
Not so cocky now, is he? Hey? I mean, no one deserves to die in caves and this, that, and the other. Don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm saying. But to be that far up your own backside that you tell all your mates to go when you are an experienced caver is stupidity, isn't it? Let's face it, stupidity. And he's only got himself to blame.
He was cold. His body temperature was dropping every minute. Desperation led him to make a fire, a pathetic, sputtering thing. He burned everything he had left, his shirt, his knee pads, even his flashlight batteries, anything to stave off the cold. Eventually, he was left with nothing but his pants and sneakers. His body was bruised and scraped from the cave's jagged walls, and hypothermia began to take over his mind. Delirium set in. His thoughts became fragmented, and his mind wandered into strange dreams of climbing over a stone slab roof, with police chasing him. It was the irrationality of his mind slipping, the mixture of hunger, cold, and fear pulling him deeper into
Yep.
madness. He could barely tell what was real anymore. While James struggled in the darkness, his companions, unaware of the danger he was in, didn't realize the severity of his situation until the next day. When he didn't appear on Sunday, they had previously entered the cave again. They spotted his light in the distance but were startled when he turned it off, refusing to respond to their calls. They thought he was good on his own. It wasn't until his mother, growing concerned over her son's disappearance, informed the El Paso Sheriff's Department. By Sunday night, a search party was assembled. But despite their best efforts, 5 hours of combing through the cave yielded no sign of James.
What?
On Monday, at around noon, hope arrived in the form of Barney Foster, someone who knew Hucka Cove Cave better than most.
Right.
Having heard of the search on TV, he ventured into the cave on his
Well,
own,
that's good.
determined to find James. While the rescue team had been prepared to let the search fade, knowing James had a habit of disappearing for days at a time, Foster wasn't willing to let the young man die in the depths of that unforgiving cave. Foster
old
pushed
Barney.
through the cave's narrowest passages, places few had dared to go, and in a particularly tight squeeze, he found a flashlight. It was the first sign. He pressed on, deeper into the cave's upper rear portion. Then, in a small room filled with large breakdown blocks, he heard it, a cough. James May lay there, on the cold stone floor, battered and
Still
broken,
alive, still
barely
alive.
clinging to consciousness. He had burned everything but his pants and sneakers to survive, and his body was covered in bruises and scrapes. Foster gave him an energy bar and water, and slowly, carefully, they made their way out. James had survived 54 hours lost in the
lucky
cave, but barely.
Fucking left him there, me. Arrogance. It's all right being arrogant above ground when you're not, like, in anywhere dangerous. Like, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other, blah, 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 blah. But when you're going underground with your mates and they know the way out and you don't, that guy's lucky to be alive. He's lucky that Barney went in there because he would have died. And it'd have been his own fault.
James had survived 54 hours lost in the cave, but barely. James May was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, suffering from severe dehydration, hypothermia, and exhaustion. He was admitted immediately and treated for his injuries, spending weeks under care. During his long recovery, James had time to reflect on the ordeal that nearly
I
cost
hope
him
he
his
turns
life.
humble.
The cave had stripped him of his arrogance, humbling him in a way nothing else could. This last story covers an incident in which the school
See? Even the most arrogant people are the ones who's up their own backsides so far that, you can't tell what's their head and their ass. Can be humbled by Mother Nature. Let's put it that way. Right, last story.
School and its negligence can be blamed for the unimaginable tragedy. It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. For the 8th grade students at Tadcaster Grammar School in the United Kingdom, the annual overnight trip to Burley Park Outdoor Education Center was the highlight of their school year. Excitement buzzed through the group as they piled onto the bus, waving goodbye to their parents. It was a week of freedom, camping, hiking, and outdoor exploration, free from the routine of classrooms and schoolwork. Among the students were Joseph, Amy, and Charlie, 3 close friends, thrilled to be away in the wilds of North Yorkshire.
Right.
At 13 and 14, they were on the cusp of starting high school, with Christmas break just around the corner. Little did they know, this trip would soon turn into their worst nightmare.
Oh, no.
On the first day, the group of 100 students split into smaller groups for various activities. While some went hiking or rock climbing, Joseph, Amy,
See, look at that.
for
Look at
various
that.
activities. While some
Look at the view. Look at all of the open space. No need for caves. There is no need for caves. That's more beautiful, isn't it? Not trapped. You've not got yourself wedged. You've not got yourself lost. You're in the nice outback. Do you know what I mean? Not going down a hole.
went hiking or rock climbing, Joseph, Amy, and Charlie, along with 8 other classmates and their math teacher, were set for a cave exploration led by a 17-year-old guide. Their destination was the Manchester Hole, a cave system known for its hidden chambers and tunnels beneath the surface.
Right.
The adventure started with nervous excitement as they squeezed into the small entrance of the cave. What seemed like a tiny hole in the ground opened into a vast chamber, with a ceiling rising 50 feet above them.
Right.
The floor was covered in a few inches of water, but their rubber boots kept them dry as they splashed around. marveling at the stalactites hanging from the ceiling. Led deeper into the cave system, the students passed through more tunnels and chambers, their headlamps cutting through the darkness. But soon, they reached a narrow tunnel, just wide enough to crawl through.
Right.
To move forward, they would have to get on their hands and knees and wriggle through the 40-foot passage. Though nervous, the students followed one another, squeezing through the muddy tunnel until they reached a second chamber. But something felt wrong. The water in this chamber was much deeper, reaching their knees. The air was colder, and their excitement faded as they realized they were standing in a pool of icy water.
Let's go back. Let's go back now. That's what I'd be saying there. You can go through there if you want, but I'm going back. I mean, in fact, I won't be down there. I'd be up on the hills are alive for the sound of music with all them other people up above the ground, nice and not wedged in somewhere.
The guide was concerned. This chamber wasn't supposed to have this much water, and there hadn't been any rain. It was clear they needed to get back to the surface, but the only way out was through the narrow tunnel they had just crawled through.
Yes.
The guide instructed the teacher to lead the students back, while he would stay behind to make sure everyone got out safely. The students, now scared, began crawling back through the tunnel, but as they moved, a surge of water rushed in, flooding the passage. Panic erupted as they realized the water was rising faster than they could crawl.
Oh shit!
Screams echoed through the tunnel as the group frantically pushed forward. The worst part came when they reached the sump, a section of the tunnel that had completely filled with water.
Oh,
to escape,
shit.
The students would need to hold their breath and swim through the submerged passage. Charlie, one of the braver students, told the others they had no choice. With a deep breath, he dove underwater, disappearing into the tunnel. Amy and Joseph were at the back.
I'd be dead. I can't hold my breath for long underwater, me. I'd be dead. Yeah, I would. I would be dead. But then again, I wouldn't be dead because I won't be down there in the first place.
Back of the group, with the guide close behind. The air pockets were quickly vanishing as the water continued to rise. The guide urged Amy to dive, telling her there was no time to wait. Terrified, Amy took a breath and plunged into the freezing water, pulling herself through the narrow, dark tunnel. Rocks jutted out, scraping her arms as she swam, her lungs burning from the effort. Just when she thought she couldn't go any further, a hand grabbed her arm and pulled her through the final stretch of the tunnel. It was the guide, who had managed to pull her to safety. Amy gasped for air, but when she looked around, Joseph was nowhere to be seen. Joseph had been right behind her, but when he reached the last air pocket, it had already disappeared. Without air to breathe, he was trapped. The water had filled the tunnel completely, leaving him with no way out. Above ground, the remaining students and teachers emerged into daylight, shocked to see clear skies. There had been no rain, so where had the water come from? In a terrible coincidence, gusts of wind at a nearby reservoir had caused a surge of water to spill over the dam, sending thousands of gallons of water into the river. The cave system, which normally drained slowly, was overwhelmed by the sudden torrent, filling the tunnels in a matter of minutes. Emergency crews arrived quickly, but it was too late. Inside the cave, Joseph's body was found in the flooded tunnel, unable to escape the sudden surge of water. What should have been an exciting adventure had turned into a tragedy. The incident shook the community. Investigations were launched, and the county council that operated the outdoor center faced questions about safety protocols. Why had no one checked?
Joe Lister died when floodwaters swept through the Manchester Hole Cave in the Yorkshire Dales in November 2005. He's one of 11 pupils from Tadcaster Grammar School on a trip to Bewley Park Outdoor Education Centre. Look at him there. Wow.
Checked the reservoir before sending students. However, no charges were filed. The authorities ruled it a tragic accident, one that could not have been predicted. For Joseph's family and classmates, the pain of that day would never fade. What began as a thrilling adventure in the wild turned into a heartbreaking loss.
Wow. I mean, can you imagine what went through your mind when you climbed through all those nooks and crannies, realising the water's getting too high? When you get back to a part where you crawled through before that wasn't flooded, it suddenly is. You would shit your pants. You would crap your... Yeah, you would. I'd be crying. I'd sit down and cry because I knew I wouldn't be able to get for that tunnel. You know what I mean? It'd be like, no, another reason I would never go caving. Okay, they could fit through all the little nooks and crannies in that cave, but no one predicted that water was going to come down, did they? Especially when it was nice and sunny outside. So it doesn't matter. Anything can happen, as that's just been proved. Wow. Not for me. Anyway, what did you guys think of this reaction? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to check out the original video and subscribe to the original channel, which is On The Verge. Go and subscribe to that video we just watched. Anyway, I'll see you on the next reaction.